So, a fresh new week has arrived, and here on this channel, that means one thing and one thing only. Every weekend, I post an episode of the series we do called Your Take Not Mine, where I turn to you, the viewers, to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week, based on what's going on at the time, and I then choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week, we got to watch more big-time matchups go down, the standings have continued to take shape, and some interesting developments have unfolded, so we definitely have plenty to discuss. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now. So if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Damar, and he says that the Minnesota Timberwolves are no longer contenders without Karl-Anthony Towns. The Wolves' breakout season last year looked to be the starting point of a perennial contender in the making, but even though things were trending up, they weren't satisfied. Even when the run to the conference finals was going down, they had a front court problem where two starting centers in Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns came with some uncomfortable lineup balance that they didn't deem sustainable long term, so they tried to do something about it. This summer, they made a trade with the Knicks, essentially swapping Towns and Julius Randle while also acquiring Dante DiVincenzo with him, so the idea was that Randle is still an all-star caliber player who is actually a natural power forward, fitting more into the positional need of the team, and DiVincenzo's volume shooting prowess bolstered their bench unit even further. So far though, their season has been a work in progress to say the least, and have not yet reached the level that they were playing at last year. They've won exactly half of their games, currently sitting at 8-8, which, in the loaded Western Conference, is good for just 11th place, which obviously is not ideal, but I wouldn't by any means go as far as to say that it's time to panic. There are a lot of weird anomalies happening with the Wolves so far that I think will correct themselves over time. For example, last season the Wolves were the #1 defense in the NBA, and Towns was often the weak link in that unit. This season, the Wolves' defense has only been ranked 15th, completely middle of the pack. Alternatively, their offense last season was pretty mediocre overall, ranking 17th, but Towns' shooting prowess was one of the bright spots there as well, and yet so far this season, they're actually a top 10 ranked offense at number 9 overall. Realistically, their defense has a lot of room for improvement, with a proven history that they can reach a higher level. It also takes time to develop chemistry when you bring in a high-usage player like Julius Randle so late in the offseason, so as they continue to get used to playing together, things will eventually smoothen out, because overall, Randle hasn't even been bad by any means, putting up a pretty efficient 22 points per game. They aren't going to finish the year in 11th place in the West, I can promise you that. The defense will improve over time, and all in all, I'm still not writing them off. The next take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Matt, and he says that the Sixers should trade Joel Embiid, Paul George, and all of their washed-up veterans in their lineup to build around Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain. The Sixers' season from hell is continuing to march on, where disaster seems to strike at every turn. After signing Paul George to a max contract this offseason, he injured his knee in preseason. Joel Embiid's knee is still nowhere near 100% health after the meniscus tear he had last season. A lot of their key role players this year just look slow and over the hill, and everything that can go wrong has gone wrong. They're currently 3-13, sitting in 14th place in the East. Paul George re-injured himself recently, Joel Embiid's knee issues flared back up and are holding him out of the next few games, and in the meantime, the hole that they are in continues to dig deeper and deeper. The literal only bright spot of the team so far has actually been rookie Jared McCain, who right now is far and away the Rookie of the Year leader after rattling off 7 straight games scoring 20 or more points. With him being just 20 years old and Tyrese Maxey being 24, the team clearly has their backcourt of the future, but they still have a lot to figure out in the present. For one, the team only gets to keep their first round pick in the next draft if it's top 6, so that's an obvious incentive to continue tanking in a draft class with a few absolute studs at the top like Cooper Flagg. On the other side though, Joel Embiid is not eligible to be traded this season due to the contract extension that he just signed, and there just is not a world where the team immediately bails on a player like Paul George that they gave a max contract extension to just a few months ago, halfway through his first season there. Going back to the original take, eventually they probably are going to be forced to blow things up unless a drastic turnaround happens, but it's not going to be at minimum for at least another year. Give the team time to get everybody on the court together for an extended period, develop a little bit of chemistry, and reevaluate in a few months. As horrible as things have been going for them, they're still only 3 games out of the playoff picture somehow because of how terrible the rest of the Eastern Conference is. So there's still somehow a path for them to turn things around. We'll just have to wait and see if they can do it. And finally, the last take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Darion, and he says that Klay Thompson was not worth it for the Mavericks this year. The Mavericks were flying high after a run to the NBA Finals last year and went into this offseason looking to find ways to get themselves over the hump to be able to actually take home the Larry O'Brien trophy next time. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are a battle-tested backcourt with elite shot-making and playmaking prowess, but it's all about finding the right puzzle pieces to complement them and the team to the best of their abilities. They made a few changes alongside the addition of Klay Thompson, including the additions of Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, and Spencer Dinwiddie, so overall there are some new faces trying to gel in new roles, and while they haven't quite been playing their best basketball yet, I think the idea of them struggling is getting a bit overblown. The Western Conference is looking stacked early on, so the Mavericks are currently sitting in 9th place in the standings, which isn't great, but they still have a winning record at 9-8. Luka himself has not been playing his best basketball either, so there's clearly a realistic path to shooting up the standings as the year progresses, as long as Luka gets back to being Luka. In fact, one could argue that their overall record is much more of the fluke and should be much better despite the early inconsistencies, because the Mavericks are currently one of the few teams that are ranked in the top 10 of the league, both offensively and defensively, as a team showing much more cohesion overall than they were at this time last year. With all of that being said though, Klay Thompson has absolutely been a problem, scoring the fewest points that he's scored since his rookie season, shooting the ball worse than he ever has in his career as well. The appeal of Klay as a shooter made a lot of sense in theory as a fit next to playmakers like Luka and Kyrie, but Father Time catches everybody eventually, and with Klay about to turn 35 years old in a few months, it's not crazy to think that they could have spent the money that they paid him elsewhere for a better return. It's not the end of the world, and by no means is he to blame for anything that's going on, but it's definitely, at the very least, a bit concerning. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the takes discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.